I'm calling to order this hearing, public hearing of the Committee of the Whole of the Council of the District of Columbia. I'm Phil Mendelson, Chairman of the Council and Chair of the Committee of the Whole. Today is Friday, November 5th, 2021. The time is 12:13 in the afternoon, and this hearing is being conducted virtually. It is accessible live via the Zoom video conference broadcast platform. Excuse me, it's also available live on District Council Cable Television, Channel 13, and it is available live on the chairman's website, www.chairmanmendelson.com/live. That's chairmanmendelson.com/live. And it will be available for posterity and history on the council's website, www.dccouncil.us. The subject of today's hearing is two bills, somewhat unrelated, but they both have to do with education, public education. The first is Bill 24-77, District of Columbia Public Schools Technology Equity Act of 2021. This bill was introduced by Councilmember Janice Lewis-George and I believe 7 other council members on February 16th of this year. The stated purpose is to require the development of a comprehensive multi-year technology plan for the District of Columbia Public Schools to support quality, equitable education that ensures one-to-one student and teacher device ratios, ensures practical digital literacy training, ensures robust remote and in-person school IT support and maintenance, ensures improved technology infrastructure, and ensures sufficient internet access for all to support learning in schools and at home. The second bill is Bill 24-432, the School Financial Transparency Amendment Act of 2021. This legislation was introduced by me at the request of Mayor Bowser on Thursday, October 7th of this year. The stated purpose of this bill is to change several of the internal reporting deadlines called for in the School Financial Transparency Amendment Act of 2020, as well as to clarify when and to whom each public charter school local education agency must submit the relevant budget information. Purpose of this hearing with regard to both bills is to hear testimony from DCPS and from the public on DCPS's current plan to ensure robust and equitable technology for students and teachers, and also hear testimony from education officials and the public on financial standards for comparing schools. Record in this matter will be open for 2 weeks. That is, the record will close at 5 p.m. on Friday, November 19th, 2021. Let me turn to colleagues in the order of their arriving. If they have opening statements, Councilmember Lewis-George.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for making time to speak with us today. I introduced Bill 24-77, the District of Columbia Public Schools Technology Equity Act of 2021, along with Council members Allen, Gray, Nadeau, Che, Henderson, Silverman, Robert White, and Bonds on February 16th of this year. This bill requires DCPS to develop a comprehensive technology equity plan, including its visions and goals for educational technology, a schedule and framework for refreshing technology at all schools, a plan to close digital literacy skill gaps, delineation of district government agency roles and responsibilities related to school technology, and a detailed cost estimate for achieving these goals. The bill also creates a technology equity steering committee to monitor, advise, and ensure DCPS successfully develops and publishes this plan. The steering committee would consist of representatives from government agencies like DCPS and Octo, but also education stakeholders like parents, teacher, and technology experts. The bill calls for them to meet every 3 years to conduct a thorough needs assessment of current education technology in DCPS, including staffing, broadband access, and professional development opportunities. Technology is essential to education. Kids learn today with computers, and we need our students to have the materials and training to equip them for life in the 21st century. I want to thank the Digital Equity and DC Education Group for their help with this bill. They are a group of DC public school parents who've spent years advocating for improved access to technology in DC public schools, even before the pandemic. They've helped identify how a lack of access to technology is a major driver of our opportunity gap, particularly when some schools can fundraise and buy their own new devices. And so they helped to lead the charge for DCPS Empowered Learners Initiative, also referred to as ELI, ahead of the fiscal year 2020 budget, including a 4.6 million investment in DCPS technology. And so this bill essentially codifies their work and aims to build a lasting and sustainable investment in educational technology in our public school system. ELI is a strong first step, and we were well positioned to weather the pandemic because of the mayor and council's foresight to get started when they did. But we need a permanent commitment to technology in our schools and a robust plan to keep our schools ready and prepare for the demands of a 21st century education. When I toured schools over the summer, most of the schools that weren't modernized recently lacked functioning smart boards that had been out of warranty, needed fixes, and some were still without sufficient student or teacher devices. Many teachers had to wait several weeks into school to get the devices they would need for the year. We also saw a need for support in technology devices within the school system, some schools only having one Octo person assigned to a number of schools and not being able to adequately address some of the technology issues that were coming up during the day with teachers as well as students. And so, that piece is very important. And when we talk about equity and what's fair, the fact that some students have what they need and others don't, and some teachers have what they need and some don't, makes it even clear that we need this. And so we need to ask the questions, how do we move forward and continue to do this comprehensive work? And that's what this bill moves towards. So I thank you, Chairman. I thank you to our witnesses, and I look forward to today's discussion.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember White.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I am really excited about Councilmember Louis George's bill, which I was proud to co-introduce, the District of Columbia Public Schools Technology Equity Act. The three words that characterize this bill are vision, goals, and planning. That's what we need to do with technology in our schools. Right now, we treat technology as this sort of extra thing we do on the side, even though it is now the primary tool we use for educating our young people. Schools are really left to their own devices and resources to determine how modern their equipment is, who they have internally helping to take care of IT issues, maintaining their technology. And there is no real plan for where we need to go in terms of school technology. Before the pandemic, there are many parents who had been insisting that we needed a 1-to-1 device to student ratio, which the city just was not interested in addressing for years. But then the pandemic hit and we had to do it, and we did. And what I think that showed us was that when we get serious about technology and how important that is, how fundamental that is to modern education, we can do it, but we have to plan. So requiring schools to create a comprehensive technology plan, requiring schools to engage their school communities and Octo to do the same, to develop a technology plan on an ongoing basis, helps to ensure that we are no longer treating technology as sort of a side project, but really as a fundamental aspect of how we educate our children. So I'm looking forward to seeing the record develop on this issue. I will not be able to stay for most of the hearing, but I will be going back to review the testimonies. It's, whether or not folks believe that the way the bill is written today is the right road, I do hope that we can agree that we have to create a technology plan so that there's equity in technology across our schools. It cannot depend on the amount of money that parents at a particular school are able to bring in themselves to supplement this should be a core part of what we do and what we fund. So Chairman, thank you again for holding this hearing, and thank you to everyone who is testifying.
Thank you, Councilmember. So what I'm going to do is we have 13 witnesses before we get to the government. I'm going to ask that all 13 come in. So staff will let you into I guess it's the participant room. Grace who is parent co-lead of the Digital Equity in DC Education. Melody Malinoff, who is parent co-lead of Digital Equity in DC Education. Regina Bell, who is vice president of the Washington Teachers Union. Salim Adolfo, who is chairperson of ANC 8C. Alexandra Simbana. Stephen Varhal, who's a teacher in DCPS. Holland Kirikati. Isel Romero, who's a member of PAVE, which is Parent Leader in Education. Laura Fuchs, who's a teacher in DCPS. Kent Withcomb, who's with the Washington Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights and Urban Affairs. Linda Jones and Janine Doherty, both of whom are parent leaders in PAVE. And Josh Boots, who is executive director of the organization Empower K-12. If you're in gallery view, you should be able to see the clock in the top row. I think that's where it usually shows up. We're going to put everybody on a 4-minute timer. Please be mindful of the time. And Ms. Hu, good afternoon. We'll begin with you.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Grace Hu. I'm a DCPS parent and one of the co-leads for the Digital Equity and DC Education Parent Coalition. Chairman Mendelson, Councilmember Janice Lewis-George, and Councilmember White, thank you for having this hearing today on this very important issue of digital equity. I'm grateful this hearing happened. Grateful because just calling DCPS to testify and asking questions, you doing that triggered the release of some of the information that we have spent months trying to get. For example, we FOIA'd assessments of smartboard condition and status after hearing complaints of non-working and outdated smartboards in many schools. The FOIA turned up nothing. When we submitted a follow-up FOIA on the inventory of smartboards, we were told it would cost over $190 for the information, and the FOIA responses are my testimony in the appendix. We've also asked for information on devices, including loss rate and warranties triggered. The school system didn't provide it. We asked for this kind of information to better understand the system context for tech problems that we hear about from families, school staff, or experience ourselves. So even when parent volunteers spend significant time trying to engage and get information from the school system, it is hard to get that information and to get transparency on what is truly going on. The executive branch agencies are not incentivized to be forthcoming with information, especially when that information could prove to be embarrassing for the administration. How does this relate to the bill being discussed today, the DCPS Technology Equity Act? The act contains specifics on what a tech needs assessment of each DCPS school would entail and what would be included in a comprehensive technology equity plan. Without legislating these requirements, I do not believe we will see those items executed in a transparent way that reflects meaningful stakeholder engagement. I am glad to see DCPS acknowledge in its testimony the need for comprehensive tech planning and see them commit to releasing a plan by the fall of 2022. This is progress compared to what happened at the November 2019 council hearing on a prior version of this bill, in which Chairman Mendelson and then Councilmember Grosso asked for a plan and never got one. However, I am concerned that without enacting this bill, the plan that DCPS produces would be more of a messaging document with not enough detail to hold the school system accountable to. And it'd be more of a messaging document than an opportunity to take a candid look at tech needs and gaps. I genuinely think that the government witnesses here today and their teams, whom we've met, want to do the right thing, but they are operating under constraints, including not being able to be completely candid about barriers and challenges. This bill would provide top cover for those dedicated public servants who truly want to address student, and school needs. My written testimony, which we've submitted, includes outlines major challenges that we see with inadequate asset management at the school level, lack of a predictable, timely cycle for refreshing classroom technology. And I believe DCPS's response to you on smart boards shows this lack of a timely cycle for tech refresh. And in particular, I would direct your attention to attachment C in DCPS's response. And our testimony also outlines issues with insufficient understanding of tech needs for each school. This bill provides a framework for addressing these issues. So in conclusion, I think DCPS has acknowledged a comprehensive tech plan, and that's great. And our testimony outlines how other urban school districts have already done this kind of planning, but we really think we need the bill to codify this and to provide that structure and framework. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Ms. Hu, and your advocacy over the years has been helpful on this issue. Melody Malinoff.
Good afternoon. My name is Melody Malinoff, and I'm a DCPS parent and one of the co-leads for digital equity in DC education. I'm testifying today in support of the Act along with my fellow co-leads. To achieve big goals, detailed planning is essential to staying the course, especially when navigating a complex environment with diverse needs and priorities like DCPS. School systems are often in reaction mode to societal, political, and financial pressures, so it's crucial to establish actionable plans that are student-centered and aligned to teaching and learning goals, and importantly, aligned to budget. A lack of planning results in ad hoc decision-making, wasted resources, instability, and importantly, misalignment to needs. To illustrate the importance of comprehensive planning, I provided an example of the many ways that DCPS users report issues to obtain technology support. The issue reporting mapping illustrates what happens when planning is not holistic, coordinated, or informed by user needs. You will see that DCPS tech support is provided by 4 entities: central office staff, Octo technicians, vendors, and school staff. The map shows how DCPS teachers and staff must navigate a complex maze of support channels to seek help. It also demonstrates the depth and breadth of technology problems related to devices, infrastructure, learning apps, the learning management system, and more that exist within the system today. Unfortunately, the maze of reporting options deters formal issue reporting, which means that important data, which should inform planning and budgeting, is never captured. And the issues that we as stakeholders raise are dismissed as anecdotal, isolated problems. As we all know, the pandemic has changed teaching and learning in our schools. Today, even though they are in person, students connect to course content, complete and submit assignments, participate in group projects, and test with devices every day in our schools. We appreciate Councilmember Louis George's recognition and support of planning as the mechanism to ensure our schools are providing technology supports for all students to close the digital divide. And we would note that when the bill was introduced, it received wide support from the council. That sends a clear message. While DCPS has made progress in provision and support of technology, we can do better. This legislation is a lever that council may use in their oversight role to help ensure quality education for DC children. We look forward to the day when every DCPS student has the right device to support learning, every classroom has the needed technology to support teaching, and every user has seamless, accessible tech support. As the public school system for the nation's capital, we should be the leaders in the education space. We need a real plan to get us there. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Malinoff. Regina Bell.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councilmember Louis George. My name is Regina Bell, General Vice President of the Washington Teachers Union. I am here on behalf of the WTU and its more than 5,000 hardworking members to support Bill 24-77, the District of Columbia Public Schools Technology Equity Act of 2021. The WTU supports this bill because we support equity in education. To prepare our public school students for success, they will all need access to technology, the internet, and IT support. What was once considered an extra available only in a once-a-week lab has become the way we all work and learn every day. Unfortunately, our city's public schools are not equal with respect to technology. This will surprise none of you that some schools have had robust digital programs for years, thanks to their generous parent body. Some students and teachers have had devices and educational software for years, while other schools have had little or none. But technology can no longer be viewed as a luxury available only to those who can pay for them. These are vital tools for the 21st century learner. As educators, WTU members may debate the pedagogical merits of any particular technology or program, but we agree that students and teachers throughout the city should have equal access to these resources. It is similarly important that all teachers are provided adequate training so they can integrate technology into the curriculum and redefine traditional learning. An important part of Bill 2477 creates a technology equity steering committee comprised of key stakeholders, including parents, teachers, students, administrators, and ed tech experts. It is important for the committee to work collaboratively to ensure trust, transparency, and fidelity to the bill's stated goals. When we had to abruptly switch to virtual learning in March 2020, the WTU offered PDs to support teachers who had to meet the needs of their students virtually. Last month, the WTU conducted a survey because many teachers had not received their laptop, which DC was to provide. If DCPS had worked with us, this delay in getting these instructional tools to teachers could have been avoided. We would love to work collaboratively with DCPS on this and other issues. Bill 2477 will make such collaboration more routine. Although we are hopeful that we can come to a tentative agreement over technology in our contract, it won't come to fruition until we come to an agreement on the entire contract. We've been in negotiations for over 2 years. Bill 2477 creates a plan to ensure equity in education. It is right that the plan be revised every 3 years, which is about the current pace at which technology is developing. Many of us have smartphones and laptops that we upgrade every 2 to 3 years as the technology advances. We owe it to our students to have a detailed plan that is similarly refreshed every 3 years. Thank you for allowing me to testify.
Thank you, Ms. Bell. Salim Adolfo.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to come before the council. On behalf of Advisory Neighborhood Commission 8C, we do stand strong and firm that this bill is something that we definitely need, especially for our schools in Ward 8. We believe that a good comprehensive plan can help elevate the students here in Ward 8 and keep them on par with the rest of the students across the city, and particularly Wards 2 and 3. We found that through our visiting schools and trying to have events in schools that internet access is very poor in many of the schools, especially in single member district ACL7. And so we want to make sure that the city does have a plan to address this. In particular, something that stood out was line 45, where we talked about key stakeholders, and ANCs were left out of the mix of who could be key stakeholders. So we think that is something that should be amended and added to the bill. Other than that, we feel that this bill does bring about some of the things that we see are needed, and that is to have a comprehensive plan, to have a steering committee, and to produce a public report for folks to be able to see. It's a good idea for us to see that because oftentimes things happen within the school system and we're unaware of it. And so having as much transparency as possible is something that we definitely support. This concludes our testimony, and we're here for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Commissioner. I do not have a copy of your statement. If you could provide that, please.
Yes, sir.
Alexandra Simbana.
Hi, good morning. Good afternoon, council members. As many of you know, I recently was forced to move my child from her beloved DCPS school to a charter school. This sudden and drastic change has confirmed many of my suspicions about our educational system. Over the last 7 years, I've fundraised, held bake sales, and lobbied this body for funding so our DCPS school could offer more reliable technology to all of their students. When we suddenly had to change schools and school systems, it illustrated inequities and just how broken our process is for appropriately and ethically supplying our schools with the materials and funding they need to educate our children. In the span of 1 week, I went from begging for 169 computers to bring my DCPS school community to the promised 1-to-1 student device ratio, to being provided a new Wi-Fi enabled device for my daughter on her very first day at her new school. This was both refreshing and infuriating. Just a few days in, I was able to speak to staff and fellow parents to try to understand how this was possible. The answer was simple. They said, we take advantage of every federal program, every grant, every opportunity. We don't leave any free money on the table. And this approach is exactly what DCPS parents have been asking the city and school system to do. Why would we not take advantage of every opportunity when our goal is to make sure the students have everything they need? On her first day of school, these were my daughter's words. Mom, they weren't kidding. They really give you everything you need. Healthy food, every school supply you can imagine, computers for everyone, everything is new. If we would have had these things at Cleveland, the things my teachers could have done. Wow. Her innocent and unfiltered comments made me cry because I know that they were true and right on point. I, along with my fellow parents, have spent the last 3 years advocating to council, the mayor, DCPS Central Office, and OCTO to find solutions and take advantage of every opportunity and funding option. I'm here to report that we are often kept at bay with platitudes and reassurances with little detail. Yes, goodbye, girls. The lack of transparency on technology-associated costs beyond the high-level numbers contained in the mayor's budget request. Exactly how funds are being used and how federal and other external funds are being leveraged make us question the extent to which the school system has a plan beyond the current budget year it is executing on. Had we had a technology plan in place, we could have seen much more robust improvements to our system needs and be better positioned to proactively serve our student and teacher needs instead of always lagging behind. Without a sustainable long-term technology plan that all educational stakeholders can see, we do not know how or if DCPS will provide all students with devices appropriate to their age and curriculum needs. A functional system and staffing at the school level to assess and track all devices and classroom technology, responsive and effective tech support, and a robust Wi-Fi availability across the city, which can be accessed by our students so they have less barriers to achieving their success. In order to make these needs a reality, we need true transparency in all aspects of technology programs. Even with our team of dedicated parent volunteers who spend several hours per week on technology issues, we struggle to get information such as how many fully functional devices do we have on hand at each school? How many are scheduled for replacement by the end of the school year? How are we integrating those, how are we integrating that to the end of year activities for students, teachers, and schools to return devices so they can be refurbished and replaced? What is the status of functionality or replacement schedule for smart boards? All of these and many more questions need to be asked in a timely, regular basis with honesty and recognition of any shortfalls so they can be addressed and we can use our funding in the most efficient and beneficial manner possible for all of our students. We're almost in the second year of this pandemic, and we must stop waiting for the end date of our reliance on technology. That day will never come. We need to stop waiting for this period to end and instead plan for the next phase, which will only continue to rely more heavily on technology and students and teachers' access to that equipment to properly prepare for the jobs and lives in the future. In order for our system to improve our resources for students and teachers, the adoption of the DCPS Technology Equity Act of 2021 is essential. We can get our DCPS schools in a position of not only meeting a standard, but a system where families see and feel their children are receiving all the support they need to succeed for their futures. I thank you all for your time and support.
Thank you, Ms. Simbana. Stephen Varho.
Good afternoon, council members. I'm a 4th and 5th grade math teacher in Ward 1. Thank you for providing this opportunity to hear support for Council Member Louis George's Bill 2477. Before I speak on digital equity, I want to thank Chairman Mendelson, Council Member Nadeau, Council Member Allen, and Council Member Robert White for their attention earlier in the year on HVACs. Students and teachers at Cleveland suffered through 2 months of exhausting heat in face masks, but I'm happy to say in mid-October, new units were installed. The objective of my testimony today is to demonstrate the effectiveness of DCPS on technology. I'm sure you've heard, but I'd like to remind you that teachers are evaluated each year, highly effective, effective, minimally effective, or not effective. Bonuses and terminations are based on these ratings. The final rating is based on several data points: test scores, unannounced observations, academic growth and proficiency, the qualitative commitment to school community, and a teacher's qualitative core professionalism. High expectations are okay with me, actually, but I have high expectations too. So I'd like to spend my time today rating DCPS's technology since March 2020. Category 1, getting students devices for virtual learning, minimally effective. While many of my students were provided with a Microsoft Go by DCPS, the rollout was so slow, our school had to go into our PTA funds to buy student computers and beg embassies for their old equipment so that our students could be virtual. I had more than a handful of students not attending for weeks because they didn't have a device. Category 2, being one-to-one for simulcasting when students are out, not effective. Students across the city were handed paper packets this fall without any support when they were on forced quarantine because schools didn't have devices to send home. Category 3, one-to-one for in-person instruction, minimally effective. My classroom is now one-to-one. Even though DCPS was advertising one-to-one on Kojo and here at the council all fall, my personal classroom was not one-to-one until week 7 of school. For those keeping up, we're in week 10. I'm grateful that we're one-to-one, but I'm not able to be 7 weeks late on any rubrics that I'm evaluated on. Actually, if I'm late to work 3 times in an entire school year, I'm deducted 10 points for my core professionalism. In fair play, DCPS should be deducted 110 points on their core professionalism for being 7 weeks late. Category 4, smart boards, not effective. Why are all the smart boards broken? These aren't cute classroom decorations. They're not chic tech accessories. Just like in the 1930s, a chalkboard was required. And in the 1990s, when I was in school, a whiteboard was required. In 2021, a digital display is required for teaching. I urge the council members to request an audit of all the smart boards, just so you can begin to understand the enormity of the broken equipment that's in our district. To review, out of 4 categories, that's 2 minimally effective and 2 not effective. If I earned that, I'd be terminated. Thank you for your time. Your vote on Councilmember Louis George's Technology Equity Act is necessary. Please don't give up on us.
Thank you, Mr. Fairhouse. Holland Kirikati.
Good afternoon, Chairman Mendelson. My name is Holland Kirikati. I'm a Ward 5 resident, proud mother of a DC public charter school student, and a data privacy attorney. I would like to offer testimony today in my personal capacity, but within my area of expertise, which is privacy rights and data protection. I wholeheartedly support the goals of Bill 2477, but I believe that it is essential to add provisions to the bill which will protect our children's sensitive personal information. Each new tech giant crisis du jour highlights that we are all vulnerable to misuse of our online information, and US law has long recognized that children are particularly vulnerable. However, the primary applicable federal law, the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, only applies to children under the age of 13, leaving most middle school and high school students dependent on state and local governments for privacy protection. So, as we seek to expand the resources with which DC students can access educational technology, let us also add the necessary guardrails to protect our children's most precious, irreplaceable commodity, their identities. My own privacy concerns around online education arose during the pandemic when my 3-year-old was issued an iPad loaded with third-party learning applications. I was actually very pleased with our school's efficiency, organization, and resourcefulness in managing this unprecedented crisis, but soon 2 privacy concerns arose. The first was my daughter's penchant for using her iPad to take selfies, and when she returned to a hybrid learning model, photos of her classmates. I was concerned how the photos of children might be transmitted without consent, or if the photos might be inadvertently backed up on school servers. I personally wiped the pictures from the iPad before returning it at the end of the school year, but I wonder how many other students had taken similar photos that might remain on the school's technological environment. The second privacy concern centers on questions about the use of third-party learning applications, which are mandatory for completing assignments. Who had access to our family's profiles? Can the applications build marketing profiles around our children's strengths and weaknesses? Can I erase the data, or are her online doodles now part of a permanent record? These are not just theoretical questions. The Walt Disney Company recently settled a lawsuit after it was discovered that their code in their online gaming applications, such as Princess Palace Pets, tracked children's activities across multiple online platforms and created targeting marketed profiles. Disney agreed to change the code, but other children's applications might be doing the same. For these reasons and others I've provided in my written testimony, I recommend adding 4 provisions to Bill 2477. First, under Section 2, the Technology Equity Steering Committee should include a certified privacy professional to advise on the privacy impact of expanded technology resources. Second, under Section 3A, the technology plan should include a comprehensive privacy impact assessment of any third-party application or planned expansion of technology. The technology plan should also provide a report of any known data breaches or of ransomware attacks on a DC school system. Third, under Section 4, the Comprehensive Technology Equity Plan should include an oversight mechanism for third-party applications and a plan for strengthening DC school systems' cybersecurity technologies as threats evolve. Fourth, the bill should prepare to incorporate the cybersecurity recommendations that result from the K-12 Cybersecurity Act signed into law by President Biden in October 2021. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to testify today, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Kirkconnell. Isel Romero.
Good morning, Chairman Mendelson.
Good morning. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you. And members of the Committee of the Whole. My name is Giselle Romero. I am proud of parent of 3 children. I also reserve with Parent Amplifying Voices in Education page on Ward 7 PLE board. Thank you for welcoming me here to talk about the District of Columbia Public School Technology Equity Act of 2021. I am testifying today because we can all see that the future is in technology. And if we want to prepare our kids for the new world, we need to make sure that kids and parents have access to quality technology devices and high-speed internet that they know how to use. I hope the multi-year technology plan and practical digital literacy training mentioned in this bill includes making sure that all parents can support their kids. As parents, we need to know how to navigate the internet, because the more we know, the more active we can be. We can help our kids with homework. Communication is very important in this plan too. You have to remember that many parents want to be involved, but may not have the right tools. I am part of the Latino community, and many Spanish speaker parents are starting from different levels. Many have not graduated from university and don't have experience with technology. We are concerned about internet safety and what size our young kids have access to. A lot of times, people in the community just block all sites because they are scared. But if we support them with how to manage internet safety, parents will know more about it and about which platforms and sites can help their kids in the school. Thank you for allowing me to testify and share what I want to see for our kids in our district. I hope you will continue with this bill to make sure that all families have access to high-speed, high-quality internet, and to make sure that we have access to information about how to get help, and we need to learn more. This includes communication and outreach that is targeted to Latinos and other special communities. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Thank you, Ms. Romero. Laura Fuchs.
Hello. I apologize. I'm on my phone, so if my camera goes off, I'm still here. But if someone could just tell me when to stop. In my life, I wear many hats. I'm a Ward 5 resident, DC Public Social Studies teacher, an elected member of the executive board of the WTU, and so much more. All of my work and the reason I'm elected to these positions is to do my best to hold our city accountable to our students and our future. In my 15 years as a teacher at HD Woodson, my experience with technology and the complete lack of oversight provided by the council is emblematic of the problems facing our district as a whole. Firstly, once again, a hearing that educators will be able to provide great insight on is being held while we're in school. We know that under mayoral control, the district's higher-ups consistently lie, principals are under pressure to downplay reality, and it is the unionized teaching force that have consistently stepped up at great risk to ourselves and spoken truth to power. We are the ones who know firsthand what is going on in our buildings, yet we are consistently devalued as members of the public who can and should be able to testify because of when these hearings are held. In 2007, my first year at HD Woodson, I taught in the Tower of Power. Let's just say we had chalkboards. I bought my own projector very quickly, and access to technology was difficult. As an East of the River teacher who does not teach a tested subject, I basically have had zero regular access to technology, and I still do not have one-to-one, so that's never going to happen. I just assume that the carts won't be available since testing takes so much time up that I should not rely on it. Most of my years teaching, we also collected student cell phones for good reason, and so we had to do work on paper. If I wanted students to do a research project, I would likely have to print out a variety of readings and give it to students. Another challenging prospect, since we only get one case of paper per semester for 100 plus students. And let me tell you how much money I spent on paper, how much time I spent basically begging for it. DCPS is a joke. DCPS loves to create sweet backroom deals where we get laptops that do not meet the needs of our students in any way, shape, or form. Usually because they're tiny and slow. When we first moved into HD Woodson's new building, we had these tiny, like 10-inch laptops that we knew wouldn't work for long. We certainly were not one-to-one, but this was a large infusion of technology for us. Within a few years, they were basically out of commission. I used them far longer than anyone else would logically use them, but that was because it was certainly better than nothing. Then our school tried the private route, getting grants and donors choose projects. This has been incredibly unstable. DCPS refuses to help fix anything. They like to try to block people from getting the cheaper options, even though we are the ones getting the money together. And then with the instability of leadership and educators, if an educator who gets the grant leaves, they often take the technology with them. Now in the pandemic, DCPS attempted to not let the students have the meager technology that we had, but after pressure, they relented. But there was no real plan. Schools were left to figure out things on their own. And let me tell you, some schools were better than others. I won't blame school leaders. DCPS literally provided no useful guidance or support. Then they brought in these little Surface Pros in a pandemic with a virtual year of schooling. Students had tiny little laptops that could barely power Teams, Notebook, Canvas, and all the other apps we needed them to be on in the course of a day. It's a complete joke. DCPS wanted students to have cameras on, and they've obviously never used these laptops that are really just tablets because it can't operate, so they had to have their cameras off. We need decent sized laptops that could have multiple tabs and apps, and that would have been more useful. But DCPS does everything without consulting the educators and students who will use the devices. We need to have this equity plan to force DCPS to do the right thing, work alongside stakeholders who actually use the devices instead of sweet backroom deals with their buddies. Also, could DCPS please stop blocking Google on our school internet? Bing just not work. Stop trying to force us to use Microsoft products. We need access to Google, period, end of story. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fuchs. And it would help if we had a copy of your statement.
Will do.
Thank you. Kent Withacombe.
Thank you, Chairman Mendelson, and to all the council members for this opportunity to testify. I'm Kent Withacombe, the Education Project Director of the Washington Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights and Urban Affairs. As the committee has testified before, one of the keys to creating greater equity in education is to further close the digital divide at schools and in homes, including devices, broadband, and tech training for students, teachers, staff, and families. The digital divide continues to disproportionately impact students of color, those in poverty, and students with disabilities. We have supported digital equity in DC Education's campaign for years to get DCPS to a one-to-one student device ratio, a one-to-one teacher device ratio, and to vastly improve teacher technology, including smart boards. Despite increased funding for this in the fiscal year 22 budget, DCPS is still not there yet. We have mentors from our many school partnerships working with DCPS students often, as in the Georgetown Street Law Fall mock trials yesterday. We have heard from some schools this fall that still have weak or erratic broadband. or their students do not have their own laptops. Instead, their laptops are on carts because there's still not enough devices for all students. Regarding smartboards, DCPS has acknowledged in its posted answers to the council's questions today that around 500 of the 3,200 known dysfunctional smartboards have been replaced so far. To truly get to one-to-one the student device ratio and other digital equity goals for our students, DCPS must have a sustainable long-term school tech equity plan, as other school districts in the DC region and across the country have had for years. The DCPS Technology Equity Act recognized that comprehensive long-range tech planning for DCPS is desperately needed. DCPS's existing Empowered Learners Initiative is not a comprehensive plan, as it does not outline expected costs and funding sources as recommended by the DC auditor in 2017. By contrast, the DCPS Technology Equity Act will require DC to look to great examples of truly comprehensive school tech plans, such as those that have been prepared and are being executed by Seattle and Atlanta school districts. This legislation requires DCPS to prepare and execute the kind of comprehensive plan that is needed. The Tech Equity Act will establish a Tech Equity Steering Committee of educational stakeholders, including teachers, parents, and students, and other tech experts, and will require regular surveys of individual schools on tech needs to develop a comprehensive DCPS tech plan in 2 years that we updated every 3 years after that. This advanced planning should address gaps in student and teacher resources, including improving broadband speed and reliability in schools. It will also address critical tech services needs, such as the training needs of students, teachers, staff, and other school community members, readily available tech support for all users at schools and at homes, and improvement of broadband speeds and infrastructure in schools and in homes. The council should note that in addition to school districts in cities like Seattle and Atlanta, states like California, Illinois, and Texas all established digital divide task forces by the summer of 2020. So DC has considerable catching up to do. Until DCPS has a funded multi-year comprehensive tech plan that includes all these elements, technology will continue to be managed in an inequitable, unpredictable, costly, and inefficient manner. A comprehensive tech plan and roadmap for DCPS is sorely needed, and it must be informed by regular engagement with school personnel and parent and community organizations like Digital Equity in DC Education. Thank you again for this opportunity to testify.
Excuse me.
Thank you, Mr. Combs. It would help if we had a copy of your statement as well.
Cut the mic on.
Yes.
Thank you. Linda Jones, you're next.
Greeting members of council. My name is Linda Jones. I'm a Ward 8 parent leader with PAVE, Parent Amplifying Voices in Education. I'm here to offer my recommendation on Bill 24-77, the District of Columbia School Technology Equity Act of 2021. I'm learning that all organized Ward 8 is a better Ward 8, in order to be organized. We must have a plan, a comprehensive plan at that. Having a comprehensive technology equity plan would be a great step toward that. I have observed that communities that have greater access to technology perform better. I want the children in our community to be excited about learning. I have access to working devices and efficient internet access can be created, greater opportunities for that excitement to exist. I do think that the Technology Equity Steering Committee working with DC Public Schools to produce and update technology plan every 3 years is a good idea. And I keep the school community engaged with most up-to-date technology. Finally, I believe that maintaining a one-on-one student-teacher device ratio for the entire school system and updated classroom technology in all schools would help Ward 8 students to par with other students throughout the city. Therefore, I do support the passing of the bill and look forward to the increasing of educational resources for our children. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. And it would also help if we had a copy of your statement. Janine Doherty. Is Ms. Doherty here? I do not see her. Let me call on Josh Boots. If she is, Miss Doherty's here, we'll let her in and she can testify. But meanwhile, Mr. Boots, why don't you proceed?
Thank you, Chairman and council members. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today on the School Financial Transparency Amendment Act. Quality financial tracking that is systemically tied to common standards is a significant step in our education system's continuous improvement. The level of financial tracking that we hope becomes the norm does take time, technology, and training. Our long-term goal in this area as Empower K-12 is to support a sector-wide evaluation of quality financial data that is tied to programmatic decisions and interventions which are further linked to student-level academic and well-being growth. Ultimately, our vision is that the DC Education Research Collaborative can conduct sophisticated return on investment analyses to guide robust decision maker conversations about the resources our educators and students need. Financial data for accountability purposes is important. It demonstrates to our communities that their hard-earned tax dollars are utilized for students in the ways that we expect. The tracking and coding for expenditures for accountability do not entirely overlap with the kind of coding required to make return on investment analyses possible. Much like how PARCC test scores have that limited instructional use for daily lesson planning, and how exit tickets and interim assessments provide teachers with the data that they need to improve, the same holds true for the kind of financial data required to drive improvement. Each expenditure should be tagged to its funding source for accountability purposes and to a programmatic initiative for improvement purposes. To foster an environment with good financial data for accountability and improvement, additional return on investment standards must be created, systems will need customization, and staff will need retraining and protocol to ensure that good data is collected and stored. This process takes time and investment, and the amendment as proposed does remove some of those duplicative reporting burdens to free up time and maintains an appropriate implementation timeline for the technology and standards that we need to create. I hope that council members will consider the level of financial investment that is also required to ensure our schools have access to the technology and training needed to have robust return on investment analyses when the fiscal year budget season arrives. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boots. I'm just checking to see if Janine Doherty came in. I don't believe she did. Mr. Boots, interestingly, you're the only witness to testify on Bill 24-432 today. You don't seem to testify though specifically on what the bill proposes, which is to change a couple of internal reporting deadline dates. I'm going to take from that you don't have an objection to the bill?
No, I'm in support of those timelines. I think they're appropriate. But I also want us to be considerate of not just accountability, the reporting for accountability, but the reporting for the usage of that data for improvement as well. I think those timelines are still fine to do both. I just want us to be cognizant that those require investment as well.
Well, are you suggesting that we should revisit the underlying bill and make some changes there?
I think that there don't need to be changes to the bill. It's the implementation of the bill that we need to be tracking.
Okay. Which is over the next year or two, as I recall. So what you're suggesting is that we have more oversight here. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I did not have questions for the other witnesses, but I do want to say this. I fear some of you might be reacting when I say it would help if we had a copy of your testimony, but it does help because for one thing, it means when we go back to look at the bill and assuming that we're going to move forward with it, and we want to make sure we are considering everybody's comments. If we don't have a copy of the statement, it makes it harder for us to do that. So it would be helpful. I noticed everybody was reading a statement, so it'd be helpful if we had those statements. Let me turn to colleagues. Councilmember Lewis George, do you have any questions?
Yes, thank you. I'm going to start with digital equity in DC, and then I'm going to go to WTU and their teachers, and then I'm going to go to students and parents. For digital equity in DC, and this goes to the panel, what's in the longer technology plans from other cities that's not in DCPS ELI roadmap? And also, if you could speak to why it's so important that we have a steering committee to help lead this work.
So the other things that other cities have included in theirs, which is in the bill that you introduced, but not in the 10-page ELI plan, are a true gap assessment or gap analysis of the tech needs based on robust stakeholder engagement. And so these other cities have gone out and either set up committees of their own or had various engagements and looked at various gaps and then tied those to the learning objectives. And so the ELI 10-page plan, that's really a high-level document. And then it also doesn't include, you know, the totality of the costs over multiple years. And we're talking about more than just devices. Like, we don't know, you know, we've spent millions installing these smart boards in schools. I don't know how much. And then, you know, so we don't have that kind of detailed cost estimate. At the same time, when you're doing tech planning, you should know what that multi-year cost is. And I don't know if others want to chime in.
Alex, I see you, Siobhan.
Yeah, thank you. So I think what other states do very well is that they engage the stakeholders at the very beginning. You know, establishing a plan and then giving me what you think I need is different than, you know, talking to me along the way, finding out what the issues are, what, you know, student needs, teacher needs, parent needs are all different. They're in the same vein, but if we are engaged during the process and part of the process, then we make something that meets everyone's needs rather than here's the plan we think you need based on, you know, their own assessments. And that is the process that continues to happen over and over again. So we need to break that cycle. There's no reason not to engage stakeholders in the development, in the writing of the plan, the execution of the plan. And that also helps create ownership, right? Like, we need people to feel ownership of our DCPS system and of their schools, and building that ownership then makes those communities much stronger. And, you know, that I see happening very well in these other states. And I think especially for our communities of color, we need to show them that we are not, that we are engaging with them and that we are listening to their needs and being responsive to their needs, not giving them what we think they need. They're two very different approaches there.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Melody, I see you.
I think so. As far as what other you know, districts do, Seattle is a great example. We've mentioned it, and it's in our testimony. Their plan is well over 100 pages, and it really very specifically ties need to budget. And that is something that does not happen. We have not seen that happen with DCPS. And when we ask for things like service level agreements between OCTO and DCPS, there is none. And I'm really still puzzled as to how we can provide adequate service when there is no service level agreement that very clearly spells out what the various entities are doing. So that when you look at a really good plan, you can see how not only do they spell out and really like down into the details, they also very, very clearly tie it all to the budget. And that helps you all as city officials, obviously, because that, you know, it all comes down to the funding of it. And then just one other really quick point. When DCPS made the decision to go with the Microsoft Go as the standard issue device, I have to say, and as Laura Fuchs pointed out, the technology needs of a third grader are very different from the technology needs of an 11th grader. And so to go with a one-size-fits-all approach ultimately ends up being a barrier to learning for kids at whatever level the technology doesn't fit. And we can do much better. We need to like actually put the devices in the hands of the kids and sit there and understand what actually works. We need to give them the right tools they need for learning so that technology doesn't become a barrier to learning.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. for teachers who testified. If you're still here, I think Laura had to jump here, but want to talk about your how often you actually incorporate digital literacy into your lessons and how often you use technology in your lessons now that you are back in person. And I know you gave some testimony already, but do your students have access to technology they need both in classroom and at home as a result of what you're seeing in your personal classrooms? We have any teachers, I think?
Sure,
Oh, yeah.
sure. I'll answer. Thank you, council member. So we use it every day now. And we've been professionally developed that our students, especially because of COVID and because of the social distancing, that students should be at a desk and I should be at a desk and we should be using technology to remain safe. So we use it every day. I don't have a smart board that projects. So oftentimes I teach 4th and 5th grade. So like I need to teach you how to use a website. So I need to say, you click here to sign in, or you drag this way, or you scroll up and down. I don't have any way to project that to a group. So I do a lot of having to walk up to them and say like, oh, here's the scroll bar, or oh, here, you click here. But then that eliminates the social distancing. And then my students do not have devices at home. I cannot rely on assigning anything to do at home. And they don't have ample Wi-Fi. And so your bill will address those issues. And we're very grateful to that. I want to point out my students are all African-American. They are all Ward 1 residents, or some of them come from Southeast. And I know that schools just in Ward 1 next to us who have a different population have more access. And so I appreciate that your bill addresses that for our African-American students.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think my time is up, Chairman. Sorry, I went over.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Lewis George. Is Robert White here? I don't think I see him. That's going to conclude then the questions for you all.
Thank you, everybody.
Again, those who did not submit written statements, please do so. Thank you for your time and for your testimony. It's helpful. And again, the record is open for 2 weeks if anyone wishes to submit anything additional. I'm going to turn now to the executive. So you all are excused. We have from the executive, Amy Maestera, who is Deputy Chancellor for Innovation and Systems Improvement at DCPS. Lindsay Parker, who's the Chief Technology Officer for the district government, and Paul Kine, who's the Deputy Mayor for Education. Deputy Mayor Kine, give us a moment.
Good afternoon. This is Amy Meister. I'm just checking to see if you can hear me, Chairman Mendelson.
I can hear you, and let me just see. I've got everybody. So are you guys okay if Dr. Maestera goes first, and then Ms. Parker, and then Deputy Mayor Kine? All right, Dr. Maestera.
Thank you, and good afternoon again, Chairman Mendelson, members of the Committee of the Whole, and staff. Thank you for the opportunity to speak before you today. My name is Dr. Amy Maestera, and I serve as the Deputy Chancellor for DC Public Schools. And it is my honor to lead the district's technology infrastructure, which supports DCPS's vision for every student to feel loved, challenged, and prepared to positively influence society and thrive in life. DCPS's ongoing efforts to ensure that all DCPS students have sufficient technology, digital literacy, robust IT support, and internet access are closely aligned with the goals of the District of Columbia Public Schools Technology Equity Act of 2021. Today, I'm pleased to share an update on our progress, as well as our vision for deepening this work moving forward. Through the leadership of Mayor Bowser and in close partnership with the Office of the Chief Technology Officer, or OCTO, DCPS launched the Empowering Learners Initiative, also known as ELI, in 2019. ELI is a 3-year plan representing DCPS's commitment to close the digital divide and empower every learner through technology. The launch of ELI provided us with a strong foundation when we were unexpectedly faced with the current public health emergency. Because of the building blocks in place through ELI, we were able to pivot quickly from our 3-year phased rollout plan and strategically blend local and federal funds to ensure that every student in need of a device and internet connectivity at home would have equitable access throughout the district. Prior to ELI, device purchasing and management were school-based and decentralized. However, because we had adopted and standardized a centralized asset inventory system as part of ELI planning, we were able to leverage this system to quickly determine student needs and manage device distribution to homes. While in a virtual learning posture last year, we offered every student in need with an internet connection through their device or a hotspot. As of today, we have met our ELI goal of bringing DCPS to a 1-to-1 student to device ratio for grades 3 to 12 and a 3-to-1 ratio for grades pre-K through 2nd, with the procurement, preparation, and distribution of over 50,000 devices across the portfolio. We have also collaborated closely with OCTO to stand up a multilingual family and student technology call center to support troubleshooting needs for our students. We have ensured that every teacher has a dedicated in-life cycle device, meaning that all devices are 3 years or newer. We have also digitized our curriculum, learning resources, and assessments, including 200 courses spanning K-12 and every content area. We have deployed education technology managers to support technology integration in the classroom. We have expanded school-based technology support from 56 technicians pre-pandemic to 89 technicians in the current school year, prioritizing customer service improvements based on school and community feedback. And we have standardized the role of technology controller in our schools to ensure that OCTO technicians and central office have a single point of contact to support this initiative. This fiscal year alone, we have made an unprecedented investment of $38 million in student and technology supports and invested an additional $2.5 million to upgrade several schools' infrastructure to ensure that they continue to offer reliable internet connectivity. We are also working currently to ensure that every school has outdoor Wi-Fi and are on track to complete installation in 2021 due to the partnership with OCTO. DCPS is committed to comprehensive and equitable planning to determine our technology strategy. It is a top priority for us to publish a public technology equity plan by the fall of 2022 that we update annually, including a detailed inventory and infrastructure for each school, as well as the engagement strategies used to inform our work. We agree with the goals of this legislation, and we support increased transparency of our technology equity work. But we would ask Council to consider providing us more flexibility in how we develop our plans, engage our stakeholders, and report on our outcomes. Over the last several years, DCPS has heard from students, families, educators, and communities about technology needs in their schools and what meaningful infusion of technology with the DCPS curriculum looks like. This stakeholder feedback, along with lessons learned from one-to-one pilots in DCPS schools, informed our 3-year ELI plan and our related investments. Additionally, since the beginning of distance learning, DCPS has been regularly gathering feedback from families about technology access and support. We have achieved this through multiple surveys at the school and central level with parents and local school advisory teams, school budget advisory boards, and regular contact with digital equity advocates. The feedback we receive directly informs our investments and programming. For example, we heard feedback from families last spring that there was a need for direct on-demand technology support. And as a result, we worked with Octo to stand up the Family and Student Technology Call Center, which I spoke to previously. Survey responses from families indicated a need for internet access at home. So we invested over $5 million to provide every student in need with internet access through their device or through a hotspot. DCPS also shared a technology needs survey with all students in preparation for the school year, this past school year, 2021. And we incorporated technology access questions in our enrollment forms for this upcoming school year, 21-22, to ensure we had captured annual data needs annually. Last, DCPS surveyed teachers about the selection of a standard teacher device prior to procuring them. As part of our strategic planning for the next iteration of our 5-year capital commitment plan, of which digital equity is a key pillar, we will engage with students, families, and staff to evaluate our progress, define our priorities moving forward, and set our shared goals. This planning process will launch next spring and continue through the summer. In addition, DCPS and the Washington Teachers Union have tentatively agreed to create a technology committee which will provide educators and other stakeholders, including students and families, an opportunity to give input on technology standards and to support implementation. DCPS has substantively undertaken steps outlined in this bill to determine the technology needs at each school, including an annual asset inventory and infrastructure upgrades. As noted above, DCPS implemented an asset inventory strategy during school year 2018-2019, and schools are required to maintain an accurate inventory of technology assets. As of spring 2021, DCPS completed our annual audit of technology assets across all schools to support annual resource planning for technology. The audit includes a physical inventory of every device in every school and an inventory of devices distributed to teachers, to students and staff at home. As a result of these standardized expectations and routines, every school has confirmed their inventory and device needs, and we have provided support and additional devices where needed. Every year, DCPS also works with Octo to assess the state of schools' network infrastructures and modernize equipment as needed. The annual infrastructure upgrade plan is developed by taking into consideration the age of equipment, network capacity, demand trends, and reported issues. As noted above, in FY22, we are investing an additional $2.45 million to upgrade several schools' infrastructure to ensure that they continue to offer reliable internet connectivity with the infusion of new devices in mind. DCPS also assessed and completed internet bandwidth upgrades in our largest schools prior to school year 21-22. DCPS works closely with Octo each year to assess our technology needs, develop a master agreement outlining the scope of technology services, and collaborate throughout the year to allocate resources to provide technology support to schools. DCPS also recognizes that digital equity is about more than devices and infrastructure, and we are intensely focused on ensuring digital literacy for all of our students. As part of ELI, K-12 students experience explicit instruction in digital citizenship. Students learn to use technology as a tool for content creation, data analysis, and critical thinking. Further, we continue refining our digitized curriculum annually, equipping our educational technology coaches with professional development so that they can effectively equip our teachers with the expertise needed to integrate technology into the curriculum. DCPS believes that digital equity is a key lever to ensuring equity and excellence for every student. DCPS is committed to ensuring students across the entire district have access to the resources they need to be successful in the classroom and prepare for college and career. As we come to the end of our current 3-year ELI plan, we are committed to engaging with stakeholders and publishing an updated comprehensive plan as part of our capital commitment that is aligned to the timeline outlined in this act. However, given the multiple avenues in place for stakeholder input, which I've outlined, we respectfully request the ability to leverage these current avenues rather than create an additional committee or process, which would be redundant. In sum, we agree with the Council's commitment to updating our technology plan within the timeframe outlined, but request the flexibility to develop the plan in a way which best aligns to engagement work already underway. I'm happy to answer any questions you have at this time.
Thank you, Dr. Maestera. Ms. Parker.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, staff, and members of the public. For expediency today, Dr. Maestera just laid out a sort of a beautiful articulation of the partnership between OCTO and DCPS. And so I don't think I'm going to read all of my testimony, but it will be around for any questions. I think the one thing I would just like to point out is the Office of the Chief Technology Officer has worked alongside DC Public Schools for over a decade, providing the technology, the tools, the on-site support DCPS has requested and required. And really for the past 18 months, what I just want to make sure to put on the record in front of sort of all of our public witnesses and the council is really both teams have worked tirelessly to support all schools as they've had to adapt to a very different environment than any of us have ever seen before. And so I do want to just point out on the record that I'm just super proud of how the teams have really stepped up in ways that I didn't think were even possible to meet the overwhelming demand for solutions to securely learn and teach remotely. And just sort of as sort of a proud public servant, want to recognize a lot of that work. But otherwise, what Dr. Maestera just outlined is the same position that OCTO has. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Kine.
Thank you, Chairman. And I'll just acknowledge for all the viewing public that I am testifying on a different matter on the second bill that is before Council today. And with that, I'll begin with a good afternoon again. Chairman Mendelson, council members, staff, and members of the community. I am Paul Kine, Deputy Mayor for Education, and thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today on B240432, the School Financial Transparency Amendment Act of 2021. This legislation relates to the common financial reporting standards that were required by council legislation, which will ensure that all public schools' expenditure data is published in a clear and consistent manner annually by the Office of the State Superintendent of Education. The goal of the new standards is to provide the public with a way to understand and compare public school spending across all local education agencies. The DME remains excited about these efforts to increase school financial transparency, and in May of this year, already established the actual common financial reporting standards as required by the initial legislation, and those are available on the DME website. OSSI is set to begin reporting the CFRS aligned school expenditure data in May of 2024 as specified in the original legislation, and in keeping with the agency's emphasis on expanded data collection and transparency. However, as our work has begun in earnest, we find that we need to make small technical adjustments to the original legislation to more closely match existing reporting and school audit timelines. Specifically, this legislation amends the School Financial Transparency Amendment Act of 2020, subtitle 4F of the fiscal year 2021 Budget Support Act of 2020, to make technical corrections to the internal submission timelines for LEAs to submit financial data to OSSI. These technical adjustments do not impact the public-facing May 2024 date by which OSSI is scheduled to begin publishing expenditure data from LEAs that comply with these new standards. Rather, the amendment adjusts the deadline from December 2023 to March 2024 for LEAs to submit audited expenditure data aligned to the standards to OSSI. These changes align submission deadlines with existing LEA auditing processes and timelines and with the submission processes and timelines required under the Every Student Succeeds Act. Additionally, the amendment reduces redundancies in charter LEA submissions, clarifying that charter LEAs only need to submit their actual expenditure data to OSSI and not to the Public Charter School Board as well. Charter LEAs will continue to submit their budgets to the Charter School Board in keeping with current practice. The appendix to my testimony outlines the date and technical changes in this amendment. And let me emphasize again in conclusion that none of the proposed changes in this amendment impact the public-facing timelines or publicly available information. We are excited about the additional transparency for DCPS and charter LEAs from the Common Financial Reporting Standards, and the DME is glad to be part of this collaborative effort. Thank you, Chairman and council members. I look forward to answering your questions. And I have included with my testimony an overview of the specific changes that are being made, which is being shown on the screen. And Chairman, if you'd like, I'm happy to go through this page by page, again, more simply to share with you and others in the public the specific changes we're proposing in the technical adjustments.
Why don't you go through it quickly?
Very good, thank you. So we'll start on the first slide, and your team, Chairman, has control, so thank you for that. The first page simply shows that we are not making any adjustments to the public-facing publication dates. So the first row required my office to establish the standards in detail by May 31 of this current year, which we successfully accomplished, and they are sitting on the website of my office. The second public-facing publication date is that in May of 2024, OSSI will publish all of the actual expenditures for every LEA aligned to the standards, and we're not proposing any change to that. On the second page, we've pulled together the specific changes that we are asking for in the legislation that simply aligns all of the dates for submission to OSSI by LEAs and also make sure that each date is feasible. In the first row, DCPS was originally required to submit their actual expenditure data by December 1st of 2023. However, that's in advance of them having received the CAFR or their audit, which is conducted by the OCFO. And then they'll need time to manually enter the data into OSSI's system. So we'd like to shift that to March 31. Similarly, for the LEAs and charter LEAs, in the next two rows, they are asked to submit their data at a time by which their actual audited expenditures would not be complete. So we're suggesting they should submit those March 31, 2024. And in addition, you'll see in the bottom row, the initial legislation proposed that charters would have to submit data as early as July 2022, which doesn't make sense given that OSSI is only going to be publishing starting with 22-23 data according to the legislation. So we are aligning all of the dates, as you can see here, for submission by DCPS and charter LEAs for all of their actual expenditures, including their at-risk funds, to March 31st, 2024. And then finally, on the last slide here, we are showing that we are simply trying to make sure that the right data goes to the right place. And we are cleaning up to ensure that OSSI receives all of the actual expenditure data to ensure that it can publish this information appropriately, and that the Public Charter School Board continues to receive budget data as it currently does. And that's what we've done with the four rows here that we're proposing. And that concludes my testimony, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll have a 10-minute round for questions. Let me just see if I have any questions for the deputy mayor with regard to the second bill. I don't think I do. Were you present when Mr. Boots testified?
I was, yes, Chairman.
Do you have any comment on his testimony?
I understood him to testify in support of the cleanup here. Importantly, I think he was making a strong case for one of the potential and very important uses that we can make of actual expenditure data, which is to think about return on investment analysis. But basically that suggests that we might be able to do a number of sophisticated data analyses that could correlate student outcomes with what LEAs are actually spending their money on. So I certainly believe that's a very important use of the data that we're producing. And his point that this kind of analysis doesn't come easy or cheap, I think is also correct. And so we'll need to think together about the priority analyses that we'll be undertaking with this data, and certainly doing that in collaboration with the Research Practice Partnership, to which he also alluded.
Can you remind me when the deadline is for parents to choose schools through the My Lottery?
Typically it's March, I think February 1st and March 1st.
Okay. So let me turn to the digital equity piece. I think most of my questions are going to be for Dr. Mastera. Why do I feel like I was at two hearings? So I listened to your testimony and Ms. Parker's about all the wonderful things that we're doing, the broad dispersal of IT equipment, digital equipment to students, Wi-Fi access, all the stuff we're doing. There's a plan, Eli. But the 10 witnesses, it's as if it was a different hearing where every one of them, well, yes, there were more than 10, testified that what we have right now, there isn't a plan and that we're not really getting the equipment out. The teachers don't have the equipment they need. Students don't have one-for-one. How can I reconcile the two hearings?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I would say that we certainly believe and feel that we can support that with data, that we have met the goals of the Eli plan in terms of our initial objectives around one-to-one, as I stated in the testimony. At the same time, speaking to what Chief Parker raised, we were implementing in the middle of a pandemic. And so there were a lot of extenuating circumstances, that we needed to contend with and manage, and a lot of learning along the way in terms of how to refine our support, our communications, and our infrastructure. And as Chief Parker noted, and I really appreciate that she lifted this up, I think our two teams and our two agencies really rose to that challenge in incredible ways. So I share that appreciation and want to echo that. It was the pandemic and the circumstance of pivoting from school as we knew it to school during a pandemic. There couldn't be anything larger to manage. And with the urgency with which the teams took on that work, again, I believe we rose to the challenge, and it is a point of pride. That doesn't mean, as I said, that there were, that there are lessons that we learned and ways that we needed to refine our work to support our school communities. So I think I would share that the plan has been implemented effectively. We've met the goals, and there were pockets where we had to look at how do we do this better based on feedback. We worked to refine our approach, and we continue to refine our approach to support, to needs assessment to all of the elements in the proposed legislation. And I think we feel very pleased with what we have been able to accomplish. And also, as I said in my testimony, ready to deeply engage in the next phase of this work.
I think I need to reclaim my
outlined.
time. So in your statement, Dr. Maestera, you said we've met our ELI goal of bringing DCPS to a 1-to-1 student to device ratio for grades 3 to 12 and a 3-to-1 ratio for grades pre-K through 2 with a procurement distribution of over 50,000 devices across the portfolio. I was reading your statement. And then I have this statement that was from an earlier witness. We would recommend you consider why a month into the school year, there were still schools that were not at the 1-to-1 student device ratio for grades 3 through 12, as stated in DCPS policy. Whether a school has adequate devices largely depended on whether the school was able to collect devices that were issued last school year, get accurate computer counts for the school inventory in the asset management system, and then request additional devices and get them delivered to the school before or at the start of the school year. In short, schools need additional asset management support, particularly our smaller schools do not have DSLs or Director of Strategy and Logistics, or that do not have budgets that allow them to find a tech specialist. So your statement, we have met our ELI goal. This other statement, why a month into the school year, there were schools that were not at the 1-to-1 student device goal. I mean, which is it?
Yeah, so I'm happy to speak to that. One thing to note that was unique over this summer and as we prepared for the upcoming school year is we did have a lot of devices in homes throughout the summer because of our focus on acceleration and the understanding and priority of continuous learning over the summer. So there was a period where at the end of the summer, and as we started the school year, we did work through that inventorying process, which the witness spoke to. We worked with every school to ensure that we had a understanding of the inventory and then distributed 2 rounds of replenishments for schools as we reconciled the data. So I think that, is the case that as we did that reconciliation, which was ongoing, we were replenishing as the school year began. But again, we were making sure that we had clarity on the inventory, and that is the asset management process that I spoke to. We need to understand the device, and then, yes.
Sorry to cut you off, but
that's okay.
I'm going to run out of time. So are the parents wrong here?
I don't know that it's an issue of being wrong at all. I would say that as a system, we were completing that asset inventory at the end of the summer. And as I noted, it was an unusual time. Again, we had permitted students and families to maintain their devices over the summer so that they could continue learning. So there was a window in time where we needed to, collect those devices, bring them in, make sure that they were operational, and really account quickly for where the.
So then at the beginning of the school year and a month into the school year, maybe longer, there wasn't 1-to-1 student to device ratio.
I wouldn't characterize it as not being 1-to-1. It was more understanding where the devices were and whether they were
not to cut you off,
and then
I think I've asked 3 questions and we're 10 minutes into this. The goal is that every student would have a device, not that DCPS has a device for every student. And either the parents are misrepresenting that, and the teachers, or else we didn't meet the goal of every student having a one-for-one device. I mean, this reminds me of the HVAC controversy, that every school is required to have an HVAC system that works. And not that they have an HVAC system. Maybe I should move on.
If I may, Chairman, I think understand what you're raising. I think the distinction I'm making is that many of the devices were with students, and we needed to bring them back into the school building and, make sure that then we had an understanding of devices that were damaged or lost. And that was an ongoing process of reconciliation. So we do have the inventory for one-to-one devices. And in fact, we have contingency devices for both students and teachers. We, in total, have 59,000 student devices in the environment. 54,000 that are in the environment. And then we have contingencies for both the pre-K device, which is the Apple iPad, and then the device the devices we use for K-12. So we have absolutely enough devices. And if there are instances where school teachers are sharing that there are not adequate devices, then we want to follow up on that and understand what's being lost in translation.
Well, you heard the testimony and there were
Yes.
instances, a lot of instances. I'm out of time. I'm going to have
Yes.
to come back. Let me turn to my colleague, Councilmember
Thank
Lewis
you.
George.
Thank you, Chairman, and good afternoon to our government witnesses. And Dr. Meister, I want to start with you. When was DCPS's last technology needs assessment?
So good afternoon, Councilmember Lewis George. The last comprehensive assessment we completed through our enrollment process for this school year. We added questions related to device needs and inventory for every family as part of the enrollment process. And for teachers, the team completed that assessment, of course, to make the purchase that we've spoken to. And they utilized both the TIP web, which is our asset inventory tool, as well as a teacher survey to understand both needs and get input on device types, which I did want to note that for every device we've purchased, we have involved the customer, whether it's a student or a teacher, in terms of testing out and selecting our devices.
Okay. And so wanting to understand the scope of that assessment, I imagine it is not as detailed as what we've described as an assessment within the bill. So did DCPS needs assessment include the items that are named in section 3, number 2 of the bill? Did it also cover things like gaps in digital literacy? There's a list, I don't want to list it all, but A through I of the legislation named a number of provisions for which we believe an assessment is done. Did it include those specific questions?
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you. So the assessment that I spoke to in terms of the enrollment forms would be specific to the device inventory and device needs. Our teaching and learning team also works closely with our education technology specialists to assess needs in terms of teacher training and professional development. I think one of the witnesses testified to that. So we're constantly working with our LEAP leaders, our school instructional coaches to determine needs around digital literacy gaps, and then supporting the adults in the system to be able to close those gaps, along with our librarians to play a significant and important role.
Okay. Okay. So, I mean, it sounds like there was an assessment, but it just wasn't as far reaching as what we've prescribed in our bill.
Yes.
I have a question for you because this came up and we visited schools. You've visited a number of Ward 4 schools with me, which I appreciate it. And then last minute, we were trying to get student devices. Why did DCPS allow students to keep devices over the summer? Why not have them return them to school so they could be ready and refreshed before the start of the school year?
Yes, thank you. So that actually was a decision that we made in response to feedback from our school communities and our school leaders who felt like because of the programming that we were working to implement over the summer, it would be disruptive and that we didn't really have the time. We did not want to take the time out of the students' summer learning by disrupting it up front. So we decided to take the approach we did for that reason in terms of the acceleration priority that we all had.
Okay. And then I want to ask the same question regarding teachers' devices, because we also went to a number of Ward 4 schools, and when we asked about teacher devices, it was noted by DCPS while I was there that it was going to take a few more weeks for teacher devices to come in. And you heard the testimony from one of the teachers who just said seven weeks into school is when he received the teacher devices. What took so long to get teacher devices in? And I guess the DCPS felt it was acceptable to have that happening well into the school year, 7 weeks into the school year.
Yes, well, we certainly did not intend for that, and that was not our goal. We certainly were working toward devices for teachers day one. In fact, we ordered those devices at the same time that we ordered our replenishment student devices, but because of supply chain challenges, the teacher devices just were delayed. There was a chip shortage issue, and that kind of set off that ripple effect that we've spoken about. So it was unfortunate, that delay, but we are pleased that by the end of this past month, we were able to complete that delivery and ensure that teachers have what they needed, and again, that we have that contingency in place.
That's right. Okay. And just to chime in there, Councilmember, Dr. Maestera hit the nail on the head. We've seen that sort of supply chain issue sort of across government, talking to lots of jurisdictions in the country as well. Everybody is looking at what we used to be able to count on as a 2-week turnaround to now almost 6-month delays because of chip shortages, but also because of glass shortages in the supply chain. So these are sort of, again, during a pandemic, right? And then add on additional supply chain challenges because of that pandemic. That's why we saw a number of those delays. I think the only other thing I'd like to point out is typically when you're thinking about asset management, you kind of estimate the number of different devices that you're going to have to replace in a given year. What I would argue is when those devices all of a sudden go home, right? That estimate is completely different and kind of thrown out the water. I think every single jurisdiction had the same issue where you kind of estimate that you're going to have to replace about 20 to 40%, right? We know that most likely when a device goes home, that percent kind of skyrockets.
Right. So based on that point, that's why I thought DCPS should have collected those computers sooner from the students this summer, because then we already knew that was going to happen. Like if you collect them last minute, we already know we can't get a good estimation of that asset management, because it's like they're all out there.
To Dr. Maestera's point, not to cut you off, but kids were still using them, and they were using them to access a whole bunch of different services that we wanted to make sure folks were accessing to sort of counter some of the learning loss that we knew was inevitable.
Yeah. Want to move on to a second. In pre-hearing responses, DCPS indicated that it plans to purchase 545 new smart boards per year over the next 5 years. Is this part of a written technology refresh plan? And how will you decide which schools get new boards first? And are you rethinking this warranty issue too? Because we've seen that a number of schools, once the smart board goes out of warranty, hands up, we can't do anything about it. So are we looking at extended warranties around that too? So that's sort of a 3-part question. Is this part of a written technology refresh plan? How will you decide which schools get the new boards first? And are you rethinking warranty given what sort of position that's put us in and schools and in the past?
Yes, thank you. So yes, we have currently a 5-year refresh plan. And we have, to answer your question about how schools were prioritized, we are prioritizing schools based on the lowest number of functional boards. And then working to ensure that, as we replace at a whole school level, we are able to replenish and keep smart boards in their life cycle as we move forward. We are planning, to your point, Councilmember Lewis George, to apply a 7-year extended warranty.
Okay.
That is definitely focus of ours, and we are excited to be starting that work this year.
Okay, great. That's good to hear. Do any schools, so some of the schools we know purchase technology with grant money or PTA fundraising. We know how that sort of creates opportunity gap. Schools in other parts of the city or have the PTA fundraising abilities to do that. Other schools don't have that piece. When that happens, is DCPS responsible for those devices too? Because that's getting at a greater question here, is then those are really short-term solutions, not really effective if that's the case.
Yes, so two thoughts there, and I'll ask Chief Parker to layer on anything that I miss here. But the first is that our technology plan is agnostic of PTA activity. And so we work to make sure that we are supplying what every school needs. And that's really a cornerstone of the equity that we're aiming to achieve. Second, the way that we manage donations is we work to, there's a process that schools need to comply with related to receiving donations. We work with the school and with the party that is donating the equipment as much as possible to ensure that we bring devices into the network or to the environment that we can ensure fully comply with our requirements. And then those devices are imaged, re-imaged, wiped and re-imaged and supported again through Octo, with making sure that we're considering student privacy and all of the legal compliance with the laws that we know are critical to ensuring student safety.
I just want to sort of double click on Amy's or Dr. Maestera's point that sometimes these donated machines do not comply with the requirements that we put out there for those donations. And that's where we see a lot of frustration, right? Here's a bunch of new iPads that actually can't support the image to get the work done. So making sure that we're sort of following those requirements is super, super helpful.
Okay. It looks like my time is up on this round. Chairman, can I have at least one more round?
Yes.
Thank you.
Dr. Maestera, from the data that was shared with us before the hearing, there seem to be many schools that do not have working Prometheum boards. It looks like Henley Elementary School, for example, has 33 smart boards, and all 33 of them are out of life cycle. What additional technology and resources are provided to schools like Henley that do not have the working technology needed to teach and support students?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So in order to address that issue, we have also purchased projectors to, again, fill that gap as we are working on this larger replenishment process that I just spoke to. So we are providing schools in need with projectors, and they're able to, do what they need to, albeit not in a sophisticated way, to project for their students. I will note that as Chief Parker spoke to, the projectors are coming in also, in phases because of that supply chain challenge. So, we continue to work on making that match. You spoke about Henley, and there are many others where we're working to provide projectors to fill the gap.
Isn't this a bit inefficient? So we provide schools with smart boards. The smart boards stop working. So now we're getting projectors as a stopgap. And at some point we get new smart boards. That strikes me as inefficient. Did Eli developed in, did you say 2019?
Mm-hmm.
Eli have spoken to how to keep the smart board current?
Yes, so a couple of thoughts there. One is that the projectors are always useful to have as a supplement. We have small group instruction. We have the resource related instruction and special education. There are many ways in which these projectors will continue to be used.
Well, yeah, except that the education teacher, presumably, if he or she needs one, presumably already has one. And if there's 30 classrooms or 33 at Henley, 33 projectors, you probably don't need 33 projectors in addition to smartboards. So it's still not strictly efficient. But what about, again, didn't Eli, if Eli was so good in 2019, how is it that such a high number of schools, that there's such a high number of schools without in life cycle smartboards?
So part of what we benefited from with Eli is the comprehensive assessment. We did focus again because of the pandemic. And if you recall, the pandemic arrived right at the beginning of year 2 of Eli. And so we pivoted, as Chief Parker spoke to, we pivoted to ensure that we were setting up for learning at home while we continued to prepare for this refresh. So that is really the strategy we employed. We needed to make sure that we were equipping students to be able to learn virtually. And again, completing this assessment, which is the foundation of the Smartboard replenishment work underway. And I should note the projector purchase is not one-to-one for the classrooms. It's really to make sure we provide supplemental support while these smartboards are being updated. And there are spaces that don't have smartboards where we might have small group instruction, so they will continue to be useful for us.
Well, I'm just having a hard time here with, I mean, what do I say to the parents? Sorry, but we don't need this legislation. We don't need a plan, because this is not sounding sounding good.
Yes. Well, if I may, Chairman, I think we're in full support of the legislation, and what we are sharing is that we are at a perfect point to have the next phase of a technology plan, and we support that process that was proposed. So we are, I don't want it to, I wouldn't want it to come across that we do not support the legislation or the need for plan, which we did have through Eli, and we're coming to the end of year 3. So this is a perfect time for us to engage in this process.
Well, so then let me ask you this. Why wait until another 10, 12 months have passed before having the plan? If you already have the template, that is Eli, maybe that's not a good template, but you say that you're going to have a plan by the fall of 2022, which could be next October, November. Why not have it by the start of the school year? So let's say July.
Well, we will certainly continue our planning process. I mean, to that point, right now, we're already thinking through the budget and procurement needs for the upcoming school year. Again, in partnership with Octo, really doing that planning, because as you know, we need to plan forward in terms of all of the preparation.
So then the budget, if you're working on the budget, it would make sense to be doing this technology planning now to inform the budget in March.
We're constantly planning, so we have to think ahead to be systemic in ensuring that we're meeting the needs of students and teachers. And we have.
But I'm not asking about whether you're planning. I'm asking about having a plan. That's two different things.
Yes, I think. I guess I'm not sure if you're asking us to complete this plan a year earlier than the legislation is asking. Maybe if I'm sorry, I'm not.
Well,
I'm not following.
I'm not impressed with where we are with technology and students. So on the one hand, DCPS says we've got over 50,000 devices. We have fewer than 50,000 students. We have 1-for-1 ratio. And then I hear from witness after witness after witness that there isn't 1-for-1. And that a lot of stuff is out of date. And the management, by the way, is also not working very well. So this just doesn't sound very impressive to me. It's like the HVAC. situation, I'll call debacle with regard to opening schools. So then what I hear is, well, we support the legislation. We'll have a new plan by the fall of 2022. And I've been around long enough to know that the fall could be December 19th of 2022, because that's still fall. Now, as we're talking, it seems to me that, I mean, why would we go into next school year and not have an answer of adequate devices and what those devices should be, and updating? And every smart board in Henley, which is a school with 90 to 100% at-risk kids, every smart board should be working. So why don't we have that figured out in time for the budget, so that the budget for DCPS is adequate for the technology? So then I asked the question, well, why can't you do the plan earlier than December 19th, 2022? To which the answer is, well, we're constantly planning, which is different. So this is a little frustrating to me.
I'm sorry, Chairman, I was not intending to frustrate you. I think I was just sharing that that ELI is our 3-year plan. We're coming up to the end of year 3, and that this is a perfect point in time for that reason to support the legislation and really think through, to Councilmember Lewis George's point. You know, she raised up the idea of the needs assessment and really thinking about consolidating the different elements of a needs assessment, whereas we might create a needs assessment, and we do have an annual needs assessment process that looks at digital literacy and the needs around learning, teaching and learning. We also look at device needs. So I think what I heard her saying is, can we consolidate and align and really make sure that we have the elements needed? And I'm sharing that we absolutely would like to do that. And at the same time, we are, because we're closing out the 3-year ELI plan, it's a perfect moment to align and to start that what we see as a 5-year plan as part of our capital commitment, create a 5-year plan moving forward.
So how soon could you have that done?
Well, we are beginning our capital commitment planning this spring and through the summer. So that will be part of, the digital equity component of that we see as a really key lever for achieving our overall system outcomes. So certainly we will be engaging in that way. We also, as I noted, are working to create a steering committee in partnership with the Washington Teachers Union. So I think that was the other, idea I have lifted up, was that we would like to align around the steering committee and really make sure that we can meet the intent of the legislation, and also because we are creating this committee, which is very much aligned with the act, that we kind of condense and create, one stakeholder engagement.
Well, how about aligning around the budget? So having a plan by March 31st of next year. Your own testimony says that you're going to have a new technology and equity plan, which you will then update annually. So the next iteration doesn't have to be the final, the comprehensive, the most complete. It just has to be a plan.
Yes. Yes, absolutely in agreement. And we do plan annually. And I think that maybe I didn't frame that as articulately as I could have, but that was what I was trying to say, is that we do plan annually. The budget needs to include all of the resources we know that we need. So that needs assessment process is ongoing. And it does inform our budget submission. And we do know that, for example, for student devices, we're going to need, based on data, we know that we're going to need to build in 10 to 15 million annually to ensure that we have adequate devices, student and teacher devices annually. We know that, and we've seen the loss rates through the pandemic. So we have a lot of really good data that informs our budget planning across this and all of our other priority work.
Let me turn to Councilmember Lewis George.
Thank you. And Chairman, I'm just going to follow up on where you were and try to see. So just to build on some of the chairman's questions, when do you expect to see alignment between DCPS plans for technology that's funded? So if a plan comes out in fall 2022, would it have to wait until fiscal year 24, or I guess school year 23-24 to have money behind it? Is there not already like a plan now for the years between Eli and the future, I think is what we're trying to get at.
Yes, I would say that we have enough data, very rich data from, the learnings of Eli. And again, with the pandemic as the backdrop, we had to pivot and dig in really quickly. So we have really granular data to inform our budget planning. And that is absolutely part of our budget planning process. As you know, the budget development work is underway for fiscal year 23, and we will absolutely be baking in all of those cost assumptions for 23 and beyond.
Okay, great. So if a plan comes out in fall 2022, it wouldn't have to, it wouldn't have to wait until 23-24.
If a plan comes out in fall of 22 for the 22-23 school year, yes, we should have already built in the assumptions needed to fund it for in FY23. If I'm tracking school year. School year.
Great. No, yes, that's exactly what I was asking. Okay, great. Great. And so I want to ask you a little bit more about the engagement piece. I know you heard from some of the parents who are actively involved, paid parents, Ward 8 parents. And engagement always is a bit what some of us feel is engagement is not the same for others. So I want to hear a little bit about, can you say more about the engagement that'll take place to inform that work? I was glad to hear, that DCPS plans to publish a technology equity plan, but I just want to hear some more about the engagement piece, because what I'm hearing from stakeholders is they want to make sure that there's real engagement there.
Yes, thank you. And we do as well. I think, I certainly heard the testimony, and we connect regularly with the digital equity group and really appreciate their input and the pushes of our thinking over the last 3 years as well. So we appreciate that and think it's an important, component of doing this work well, for sure. I also hear, that it feels like we need to do a little bit more. And so that is part of what we would hope to do through both the strategic planning as part of the capital commitment work that we're launching this spring, really focusing on digital equity as a core component of that plan. And then also I mentioned earlier the committee that we are looking to stand up in partnership with the Washington Teachers Union. There's a specific committee that we're defining related to technology, which would include teachers, family members, certainly OCTO, DCPS central representatives, to create standards for the classroom and think through all of the needs and resources that are needed. And we would be looking to review that annually with that group, to make sure that we're getting that feedback and staying on track.
Great. I'm glad to hear teachers, family members, OCTO, DCPS central office teachers all together in that. And I think one of the witnesses said, we want to be on the front end of things. We want to be consulted in the beginning. So I hope that includes a front end approach. Like we're not presenting our plan to you. We're coming to you first and saying, what do you want that plan to be? And I think that'll actually get some really great results. Some schools have brand new technology, including laptops and smart boards, and others don't. What's the plan to make sure every school has a baseline functional technology as soon as possible, so that we let's get to that baseline point first and then move from there? What's that plan look like?
Yes, thank you. So certainly in terms of Eli, that is a key goal of the plan, is to ensure that we have that foundation in place, both with student devices, infrastructure, and we've spoken most recently to smart boards, which I think is the third leg of the stool in terms of just making sure that every school has what it needs. So that is absolutely what we've been working toward. And we would continue to focus on that digital access, which is one of the 3 pillars of the Eli plan. So digital access for all, and then continued systemic review and replenishment of resources so that everything is functional.
Okay. And to that end, the Empowered Learners Initiative helped get DCPS to a 3-to-1 device ratio in grades Grade 3 to 2nd, and that 1-to-1 device ratio in grades 3 through 12, which is wonderful. What's the plan moving forward to make sure we maintain those ratios? Now we're to the maintain point, and I'm really hoping that we can do that because it was, the Empowered Learners Initiative was amazing. What do you foresee as the plan to maintain those ratios?
Yes, thank you. So the plan is to, again, using our tip web, which is our inventory system for devices, we are tracking closely the life cycle of our devices and also the condition of our devices. And we work with Octo very closely to help us evaluate, are the devices functional? If they're damaged, what should we do in terms of accessing the warranty, the 3-year warranty, those kinds of things. And so that work is ongoing. And as I may have noted earlier, we have the data to know that we're going to need between $10 and $15 million annually to ensure that refresh occurs.
Okay. And I'm going to keep going because I got 3 minutes. I'm trying to get to Octo. I'm trying to get to you too, Octo. So let me, one last question for you, Dr. Maestera. I had a question just regarding about the overall plan to promote digital literacy.
Yes.
And in that overall plan, I sort of want to understand, how does DCPS assess students' digital literacy skills? Like, what does that look like? Are you getting that information from teachers? Are you taking assessment on your own? Is there sort of a monthly, quarterly assessment? How are you assessing students' digital literacy skills? And then how is that informing the overall plan to promote digital literacy?
Yes, thank you. So a few things there, and I'll try to be brief as well, because I know that your time is limited, but we do currently align our digital literacy approach with the International Society for Technology and Education Standards, ISTE. And they really create kind of the gold standard in terms of how to develop curriculum that includes digital literacy as an explicit skill. And so that's, pre-K through 12, we work to embed that into the curriculum and then do those look-fors and make sure that we are measuring and monitoring to make sure that students are learning as we would any other skill. We also provide explicit instruction in digital citizenship, all of the key platforms that our students use, as well as safety. That is part of the SIPA requirement, that we are educating students in how to remain safe online. And we see through all of the platforms that we are using, we're able to track usage and really understand how students are learning. There are a lot of self-paced lessons that we have in our Canvas Mastery Connect system, Nearpod, other tools that really give you and give the teachers a lot of live data about how our students are progressing and levels of mastery. So we have a lot of rich data because of the platforms themselves. They allow us to have that window in real time.
So do the platforms, do students take tests or get grades on these standards, through the, through the platforms?
Yes, they are assessed on the standards as we would with other, all of the other skills that we work toward and really looking for mastery of the standards. We do have assessments built in, particularly for the self-paced components, because the student has to master a certain level before moving on to the next level.
Okay. So do you know how many students are performing up to those standards now? I'm sure you can't give me those numbers right now, probably, but if I asked you that, could you, based on the assessments you all are taking, could you give us a breakdown of how our how many students are performing up to those standards now?
We can certainly look at that. I'll bring that back to the team and understand how we assess that skill set, and we'll certainly be happy to follow up with you on that.
Okay. And outside of the programs, the Canva programs, additionally, do students take technology courses in DCPS? And sort of how much instructional time is devoted to teaching kids how to use technology in school?
It is certainly a focus of our technology team. We actually have coaches for our teachers to help them with that explicit skill set. So it's a very significant focus of our teaching and learning team. It's embedded into our core content, and we also, again, provide a lot of explicit coaching for our teachers so that they can embed that with their lessons with their students.
Okay, and that question, one more.
There won't be a third round. So, and you had some questions for,
yes.
So maybe like 3 or 4 more minutes.
Yes, please. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. And that question that I just asked actually goes directly into what I wanted to talk to CTO Parker about, which is Octo support of DCPS. If I said to you, CTO, I think we need more Octo support in schools. I think the ratio currently of support staff to schools should be improved. What would you say back to me if that's my notion, right? Because I think there's is it right now that each school has a Octo person assigned? There was one staff member there. Or is it that, because one time I thought I understood it that there was a Octo person assigned to multiple schools. And then I know there's like the online support, which is great, but I'm one of those people who need like direct, like hands-on support, which I imagine there are more people like me who need that, like, hey, I need you there support. So what's the current ratio for Octo in school support? And do you think, based on my what I'm saying, I think we need more. What is your response to sort of that ratio and improving it?
Sure. Thanks. Thanks for the question, Council Member. I think a few sort of data points to sort of illuminate in this conversation is one, pre-pandemic, we had 56 technicians in schools. During the pandemic, we, in our partnership with DCPS, we expanded that number to 70. And this year we walked in the door with 89 technicians. And so we've really kind of bolstered that team to better serve the needs of DCPS schools. We've also changed the model this year. So at most, a technician has 2 to 3 schools that they're supporting. But in sort of changing our model of support, we now also have a team that's able to quickly support any issue that's sort of larger than just sort of the one-off, two-off issues that need to be addressed. And so, what I would say back to you is that we're evaluating. We've got a new model in place, and I wouldn't say that anybody is completely clear on whether or not that's not the right amount. There's nobody out there. And so, in fact, what we'll continue to do is gather that information throughout the year and work with DCPS to make sure that we've got the right balance.
Okay. I appreciate that. I think, and then when you take a look at, I think, I know work orders are different for, Octo requests versus, other things. I think maybe one of the numbers to look at would be sort of how many, work order requests are coming in at a specific school. I'm sure you already have that in the criteria, but I think that would be a great place for that. And what about, we want Wi-Fi. We talk about broadband access, Wi-Fi, and how important that is for our students. What do you see as far as Octo's role in ensuring that all of our students have access to not just Wi-Fi, but like high-speed Wi-Fi, because we know that's also an issue. If you have programs running slowly, it becomes a frustration. And so what do you see as Octo's role and vision there in ensuring that students have high-speed and quality Wi-Fi internet to be able to do the work they have to do at home?
So I think there's 2 questions there. One being in school. We know and we continuously monitor in real time every day how much bandwidth we have in schools. We've got a 1 gig connection at every single school. 5 schools have a higher connection just based on use. We haven't seen anyone get to 50% of usage this year. So although everybody was very, very concerned about all the devices now being used in schools, we have not seen that that use rise above 50% of our bandwidth. So that's not concerning. At home, it's a different story. And we've been working we've been working with a number of partners across government, private industry, nonprofits, and academia to really think about what the right approach is to bridging the digital divide more generally. And have had some tremendous conversations. This is under the techtogether.dc.gov scope. Mayor Bowser launched during the pandemic. We are in the process of sort of coming out with the recommendations of that working group and how we'll move forward. There's obviously a lot of federal money sort of about to be on the table that we can go after to make some significant improvements to that. And I look forward to working on that with everyone.
Great. I'm glad to hear, and I look forward to working with it. Thank you, Chairman, for your latitude, and thank you to our government witnesses.
Thank you. Dr. Maestera, I'm assuming that Eli is writing is a written plan?
Yes, I believe we have submitted that plan prior, but we can certainly follow up.
Would you provide another copy then?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. And Ms. Parker, there was a witness who testified there's no service level agreement between Octo and schools. You heard that testimony, I believe. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I think you know what, Mr. Chairman, I've realized that I've never testified in front of you before, but man, I've watched a lot of hearings and I realize that is not a question, but you're asking me to comment. I will do that. My comment on that is that we have, I think we've come a long way in the DCPS Octo relationship over the past couple of years. Eli has allowed us to really streamline our ability to respond to service requests. What we were seeing prior to Eli is to sort of a lot of the witnesses to commentary as well as Dr. Maestera, we had a number of different devices in every single school, right? There was no one common device that needed to be serviced. And so therefore, you could see a school device that was 10 years old, you could see a school device that was 2 years old, and any different combination of operating system and device. When it comes to supporting something like that, it's hard to guess how long a repair to a 10-year-old device that has an outdated operating system is going to take. Obviously, it's going to take a little bit longer than the tablet that's sitting right next to it that's new and operating with new software. And so what the Eli program has allowed us to do is really focus on supporting the devices that the central buy of DCPS is supporting, so that we're able to really establish sort of what the right support level is and be consistent about it. And we are continuously looking at the tickets that come in for support, how fast we're closing them, and ways to increase that response time. I think we've done sort of a better job than ever. We're sort of at 93% this year. And a lot of that, again, is due to 93% of closing tickets on time. And that is because of the Eli initiative.
So was the witness wrong then when she said there's no service level agreement between Octo and the schools?
So I actually would posit that a service level agreement between Octo and the schools was not even prudent in the past. Now we're working on making it even, we're working on making sure that we've got the right level of support for the schools. And so that's something that we could contemplate. But the truth is, the fact that we are two government agencies working together, it actually allows us a lot of flexibility. It allows us to focus on the things that we need to focus on in order to make technology work in schools. Arguably, a service level agreement is tremendous if you've got a contract and you've got a vendor that you need to make sure you're incentivizing to work the right way. What I found at Octo is we're working overtime and we're doing a lot of different things every day in order to meet meet the needs of DCPS. I don't want an SLA to tie our hands in meeting those needs, but would be interested in understanding a little bit more about what we all see as a benefit. And so look forward to that conversation.
So related, there's been talk about asset management. Will Octo be providing a comprehensive asset management program to support schools in maintaining device inventories that have increased since pre-pandemic times?
So, you know, and this is I think one thing that I'd like to point out for everybody is we don't actually do asset management for DCPS. So DCPS does their own asset management. They deploy those assets, and then once
could you be supporting them on asset management?
Yeah, and to Dr. Maestera's point. Sorry, say it again.
Would Octo be supporting them, or is it just DCPS is on its own?
To Dr. Maestera's point earlier, we support. So we provide the support to that asset once it's in the school. We're also supporting DCPS as they continuously kind of monitor those assets and assess the needs. And so I think that's another part of the conversation as we change our model of what great support looks like. That's part of the thing. That's something that's on the table, right? Is there is there a better way to do asset management going forward? We're always looking to answer that and make changes and adjustments as needed. Dr. Maestera, is there anything else that you'd like to add on that?
No, I think you covered it, Chief Parker. Just echoing the close partnership, I would just add that our teams meet twice a week and are in daily conversation. And we have weekly all hands with our school technology controllers together. Everything is really joined at the hip. So.
Yeah, but I feel like this isn't being answered. So this was testimony we got. DCPS has stated that it has an asset management system, which they use to accurately track the inventory at each school. However, the management system is only accurate when staff have the capacity and knowledge to use it effectively. In a DCPS survey of school leaders this summer, asset management was the #1 item identified for additional support. So I think my question is this something that Octo provides, or is this solely DCPS?
Dr. Maestera, do you want to take that?
Yeah, certainly. So we provide the asset management system and process. We have a technology controller identified in every school. We do, as part of ELI, provide a stipend to support that additional work because we do know that it is an added duty. And as I noted, we provide really robust support throughout the year to those technology controllers through our cluster support model, the all hands meetings that I mentioned that we have weekly, as well as our central services IT team. So we do oversee asset management in that way. But then again, as Chief Parker noted, consult closely in terms of device condition and next steps for devices when we do see that there are damages.
Well, actually, my question was whether Octo assists in this area. And so I don't have that answer.
No, I think we've answered it 2 different ways, but I'm happy to try one more time. So we, DCPS determines what school needs what device. That device gets deployed. Once the device is deployed, Octo then supports that device after it's provided to a student.
Well, maybe the confusion is I don't mean support. I mean management, keeping track.
Right.
Are they broken? Are they coming back?
So historically, that has not been Octo's role. But again, like I've said, we're working closely with DCPS in order to figure out what the right relationship there is. So this year they're auditing, right? Who has what and who needs what. And we're working closely on that because we've got a body in a school that can help make sure that the information that they're gathering is accurate. So that is something that we are working closely on.
Okay, well, it's pretty clear to me that asset management hasn't been a strength with regard to digital equipment with DCPS over the past 12 months. Because there were all these devices that were out there in the summer, and there were all these students and teachers the first month of school who didn't have devices or smart boards or whatever. So I'm pretty clear that whatever system DCPS has, the testimony that I read to you a minute ago is still a legitimate question. In a DCPS survey of school leaders this summer, asset management was the #1 item identified for additional support. And over 3-4 minutes, I haven't gotten a sense that anything's going to be different in terms of additional support.
Chairman, if I may, I would add a couple of thoughts. One is that it is important for the schools to, who have the relationships with students and families, to really play a lead role in supporting the tracking of assets. And the other thought would be that we also have some significantly increased the number of technicians, as we spoke to and as Chief Parker spoke to. We've almost doubled the number of Octo technicians supporting our schools this year if you look at pre-pandemic levels. So I think that what Chief Parker is speaking to is that effort to almost double the number of technicians from Octo is a step we've taken, and we're continuing to monitor and make sure that
and those technicians are tracking inventory?
No, but they are supporting.
That's what I'm asking
inventory.
about.
So our school teams track inventory, and the way that I shared, we have technology controllers that are identified in each school, supported by our cluster support teams and then our central office teams. Octo's role and the technicians are to help manage and navigate if there are challenges with the technology device repairs needed, and to help the school team really navigate and keep track of the condition of the device. So the two go hand in hand. As I noted, that is, our increase in technical support from Octo has almost doubled this year to acknowledge the influx of devices in our environment due to culminating our purchases for Eli, where we are now at this enhanced level of one-to-one device ratios.
My last question, I think, has to do with the testimony that somebody gave that the software needs to be differentiated between grades. That's basically the way it was said. If I remember correctly, I can't remember what the software is, Microsoft something or other is, if it's appropriate for a elementary school kid, it may not be appropriate in terms of being able to have the capacity for a high school student. But the testimony seems to be that we have one size fits all.
Yes, so Chairman, I'm happy to touch on that. And Chief Parker can layer on as she sees fit. But I think that the witness was speaking about our devices, perhaps. And I did want to note that we, as I mentioned, we for all of the devices that we selected, we did test the devices out extensively. And for our student devices, we did test them across grades. We have seen with the rollout of the initiative, and this points to one of the learnings that I mentioned earlier, that our devices are, where we have students in CTE programs, there are additional applications for the CTE programs that take additional bandwidth on the devices. And so that is something we're looking at as a place where we likely will need to differentiate moving forward, because again, students in CTE programs have those additional applications. But we did certainly assess across all grades before we selected our devices.
Chairman, you're on mute.
Thank you. You talked about CTE. What does CTE stand for again?
Career to education programming.
Okay, but does it make sense? Why does it make sense to say that a fourth grader needs the same software with the same capacity as a 12th grader?
I think it's the way that we approached the purchase of the technology was to make sure that it could support needs of a secondary student because we know also that if we have a device that supports the greatest needs, that device will also support lesser needs, and it allows us to be flexible and nimble in terms of the device inventory as a portfolio. As I noted, we are, as one of the learnings, thinking about differentiating devices for certain secondary programs based on what we've learned upon implementation. So we will continue to refine our purchases to make sure that, again, I gave the example of CTE students, that they have the capacity that they need.
Thank you. I have no more questions. That's going to conclude this hearing. Again, this has been a hearing on two bills, Bill 24-77, DCPS Technology Equity Act of 2021, and Bill 24-432, School Financial Transparency Amendment Act of 2021. The record in this matter will close in 2 weeks. That is, it will close at 5 p.m. on November 19th. I want to thank all of the witnesses, and with that, the time is 2:43.